If you were a fan of the Taz-Mania cartoon series in the 1990s, then you really had two radically different 16-bit games to choose from. In one corner, there was Sega, who released a fairly typical 2D platformer that may not have reinvented the wheel, but certainly pleased fans with colorful graphics and zany locations. On the other side of the ring was a unique 3D experience from Sunsoft that heavily relied on the Mode 7 chip to give us something akin to a driving game. This represented two very different philosophies in game design. But which one was better? And more importantly, can we use classic magazines to crown a winner? To answer those questions, I decided to flip through the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, Video Games and Computer Entertainment, and more classic magazines that reviewed both versions of Taz-Mania when they first came out. Today we're going to put the loon back in Looney Tunes and see if we can settle this debate once and for all. This is Magazine Matchup.
Electricity? Careful there. Ha! Or it'll toast your eyeballs.
Now, I don't know if it's because the license has prevented Sega from including it in all those retro game compilations, or if suddenly everybody has turned on the notoriously hot-headed Toon, but nobody ever seems to talk about Sega's Taz-Mania games anymore. Because of this, it may come as a surprise to hear that the critics generally liked Taz on the Genesis. Electronic Gaming Monthly liked it enough to give the game an average score of 8 out of 10, with Martin calling the game great and praising that it has lots of technique to master and great gameplay. The graphics are very cartoony and feature great animation. His only complaint was the music. That said, Martin was not nearly as kind to the Super NES version. "This is a completely different approach to Taz games," he exclaimed. "The first-person perspective is cool, and the scrolling is very well done. The gameplay is good, but gets very repetitive rather quickly. Maybe a little more variety would have made this cart shine." EGM gave the Super NES version of Taz-Mania an average score of 7 out of 10, which means that the Genesis takes it in round 1. Now, when it comes to video games and computer entertainment, Zach Meston was not nearly as enthusiastic about the Genesis side-scroller. Giving it a 7 out of 10, he concluded that Taz-Mania is an above-average platform game, but there's not quite enough action to be had, and most players will have the game whipped in short order. Taz-Mania is great for younger gamers and beginners, but veteran Jenny players won't find enough here to challenge them. As it turns out, Zach also had a bunch of complaints about the Super NES version, arguing that with a slightly reduced difficulty level and a few gameplay tweaks, Taz-Mania would have been great. As it is, it's merely good. Advanced gamers and cartoon freaks should definitely check it out. Other players may want to consider a more conventional driving game. This led Zach to giving the Super NES version a 7 out of 10, which means that it's a tie, right? Well, wrong. You see, in 1993, Video Games and Computer Entertainment decided to institute an Editor's Corner section that offered 4 more review scores in a paragraph describing the general consensus. With the other editors giving Taz-Mania slightly higher marks, they actually pulled the Super NES score up to an average of 7.8 out of 10. In other words, the Super NES version is officially on the board. We have a game going on here. So if you're looking for GamePro to break this tie, then prepare to be disappointed. Because, as it turns out, GamePro did the most GamePro thing ever. When they reviewed the Genesis game, they gave it a score of 5 out of 5, concluding that overall, Taz-Mania is a solid Genesis title that any Taz fan should seriously consider adding to his or her game library. Contrast that with the Super NES version, which, of course, also got a perfect 5 out of 5 rating and fun factor. On the surface, Taz seems to have pretty basic one-dimensional gameplay, but don't tune this card out. The later stages are difficult and challenging. They'll keep you on the run for hours. Children will be entertained by the cartoon graphics, but they may find the tough action frustrating. Taz-Mania is a fast-moving, good-looking devil of a game. With both games getting a 5 out of 5, we're marking this one down as a tie. Okay, now this is where things start to get a little bit complicated. It's great when we can look at the reviews in the same magazine with the same critics like video games and computer entertainment, but we don't always have that luxury. Sometimes we need to look at reviews that are from the same magazine family. We're going to do that right now with Sega Force and SNES Force, two UK magazines published by Europress Impact. Now while we're at it, let's go ahead and mix things up a little bit by starting with the Super Nintendo version, which SNES Force gave an impressive 86%. From the minute I slammed in the cart and heard the familiar Warner Brothers theme tune, I was hooked on Taz-Mania. The crazy jingle sets the atmosphere perfectly for the hilarious gameplay. Although the emphasis of the action is on fun, that doesn't mean Taz-Mania is easy. The scrolling is very smooth and fast. Having one life is potentially frustrating, but it keeps you glued to the action. The only problem is the lack of variety. As it stands, it's a very enjoyable game that'll keep all gamers happy. Yeah, that's high praise indeed, and it's definitely going to be hard for the Sega version to top that, right? Well, on second thought, maybe it won't, because Sega Force gave Taz-Mania a score of 96%. Yeah, calling it a stormer. Matt said that Taz looked so good you'd think that Rolf Harris was inside the TV drawing the bloody thing. I haven't put Taz-Mania down since it arrived at Sega Force HQ. It's so blinking addictive, you'll soon leave that Sonic card on the shelf, gathering dust. Yeah, now that's what we in the industry call hyperbole. It also means that the Genesis is back on top with another point. Alright, if you're gonna let me get away with Europress Impact's console-specific magazines, then please allow me to do the exact same thing with Sendai Publishing. Both Mega Play and Super NES Buyer's Guide were sister publications to Electronic Gaming Monthly, often sharing the same editorial, staff, and resources. Now, when it came to the Genesis version, Mega Play liked it about as much as their bigger brother, giving it a 7.75 out of 10. Fantastic! Oh god. This game looks just like the cartoon and is just as hilarious. While the game is not too easy, it's not impossible. The tornado spin is great, a sure hit for the kids. So that's basically the same score that we saw over at Super NES Buyer's Guide, who gave it a 77% and argued that the cart features great use of a great Looney Tunes character, the Tasmanian Devil. Other than Taz's great death scenes, which are a riot, Taz-Mania offers as much skill as any behind-the-scenes driving game. However, after the first 5 times playing it, Taz gets as tired as the character does at the end of a level. Now, you could probably argue that by rounding up, the Genesis version actually wins with an average of 7.8 out of 10, but I don't know, that just doesn't seem right. I think I'm just gonna mark this one down as another tie. Probably the most exciting matchup comes to us via Mean Machines, with the 2 scores being only a few points apart. Let's once again start with the Sega side-scrolling version, which earned an 81% in their 21st issue. There's no question that Taz-Mania is visually one of the most stunning Mega Drive games yet. It's virtually identical to the Taz cartoon, right down to his aggravated fit when he's left alone for a while. Despite all of this, the thought of another Mega Drive platform game still wasn't all that appealing. Taz-Mania is a very good game with fantastic graphics and some really smart gameplay. But when it comes to the ultimate and Mega Drive platform thrills, RoboCod is still the one to go for. So 1 year after the Genesis version came out, Mean Machines had fractured into 2 different magazines. One of those was Nintendo Magazine System, where the exact same critic, Rad, gave the Super NES version a score of 78%. That's right, he preferred the Genesis version, but not by much. What is Taz about? The game is very simple speed, run up an endless road grabbing little yellow birds within the time limit. As a result, office opinions have been pretty polarized. So when I tell you that I've become quite endeared to this game, bear in mind that others hate it equally. Oh, how I wish they would have published all those arguments going around the office, because that sounds way more interesting than any of these Taz games. That said, the Genesis version once again takes it, though not by a whole lot. And there we have it, the final score of 5-3, with the Genesis taking it. Although the results are a lot closer than what we saw with that Aladdin episode, this is yet another matchup where Sega fans leave happy. By playing it relatively safe, the Genesis version was able to win over not only the critics, but also a lot of fans. So many, in fact, that they would eventually release a sequel where Taz was forced to escape Mars. We never did see a sequel to the Super NES version, so don't expect a rematch. We'll just have to find a new pair of games to compete in our next episode of Magazine Matchup.
Introducing the Looney Tunes family of video games from Sunsoft.
Family pictures.
There's Bugs Bunny Rabbit Rampage.
Now you're talking.
Speedy Gonzales.
Arriba.
Looney Tunes.
Fluffer and Fuckatash.
Roadrunners Death Valley Rally. Beep beep. Taz-Mania. Finally, Daffy Duck, the Marvin Mission.
Excellent.
Move, Earthling.
Kinda pushy for a guy with no mouth. You're despicable, and I'm iridescent. What do you know? Glow in the duck.
That's it. The Looney Tunes family of games only from Sunsoft.
Hey, thanks for watching me break down these classic reviews. This is one of those shows that isn't on a set schedule and will just pop up whenever I have a good idea. I mean, you can expect to see more magazine matchups in the future, whether that's next week or next month. I can't tell you right now. Expect the unexpected, I guess. Now, here's the question I have for you. Which Taz-Mania game is best? Super Nintendo or Genesis? Look, this was a closer battle than Aladdin, but mostly because of those ties. I'm actually excited to see you pick apart these two games in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back shortly with a review of Paperman Adventure Delivered, as well as a brand new episode of the Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Till then.